Alrighty, so let's now talk about our graded work, okay? And what we're going to do is give you a visual on what you're about to learn so that as you get this content, Kevin's going to cover, and then you have that content that you will implement into your Project Zero. I want you to start the week with at least an understanding of when you see things move on a website, what's generally working behind the scenes to do that because you're implementing two, and actually more than that, but specifically Flexbox for alignment and CSS for structure, or CSS grid for structure. Now you're also doing responsive images. You're using Flexbox for your navigation this week. You're using grid to do 2 columns, but you're also implementing images that are flexible, right? In addition to, you're doing something called media queries. Okay, so what happens is when a site hits a particular resolution, I'm going to show you this in a minute because this is going to be part of what I want you to kind of get a little hands-on for. That it changes. It's almost like if you've ever watched a site and looked at, and I think I've shown this, but I'm pretty sure I have. If I haven't, I'm going to show you today how to actually look at a site at different what we call viewports. And this is an important topic, one that as I was doing the code along this week, and this is so important, is that I was coding along with Kevin as I do, as I review the code along instruction. And I was realizing that when he set a breakpoint, the page wasn't changing the way it should have. And what I realized is there's been something missing in the HTML. And this is what I say, is this is why I'm saying it. Make sure you add this to each of the HTML pages for the code along. So there's 2 of them. And for some reason that link was hard to give you. So I've given you as a Google link that actually is here, or you can grab it here. And I'm just going to show you. So it's the meta. So it's up in the head section of your both index and getting started. So what you want to do is make sure it's there and then go into your getting started and do it there as well. Okay. So in this case, I get to show you here is you just paste that in. Okay. And you can just do a commit saying viewport, because what this is going to do is actually now the viewport is through the view of the user, then it is going to flex. We're going to see things change. Okay, so first do that. Okay, because if you don't do this, when you get to the code along, which you will start next, and I have a video telling you to really kind of take your time if you can through the code along, because there's such important topics here at the end. But make sure you do this now so when you're there, you're good to go. Okay. So what we're going to do is I want you to choose a website of your choice, not your own, okay? Or it could be related to your project theme, but not your project because we haven't implemented these things in there. Like for me, I would say I want one of my favorite sites is something I use for my indoor cycling because I cycle both outdoors and indoors. This is one of my favorite sites that I go to and look at what's currently happening. So one of the things, and I'm going to drag this out, okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it on the side, okay, and then I'm going to change it. And what will happen is, and you can see some things starting to already change, okay. So as an example, the image itself changes, okay. The menu changes, right? So we kind of look at this. This is your nav. This is the thing we've actually started creating, but now we're going to make flexible this week. So when you're choosing your site, I want you to actually look at how these things are changing. Now, the other way, and this is something because we've been using dev tools, the other thing you can do is right click and go into inspect. And under inspect, if you don't have this highlighted, now because you could do the same thing here, but the other thing you can do here is you can click this little icon where it says device, toggle device toolbar, and then it should default to responsive, and then you can do that same thing in here. Now, the nice thing about doing it in here is you actually could go in and start watching the CSS change as you move this. Now, this is not vitally important that you do it, but as you learn more about certain things, like right here, I could hit inspect. Okay. Okay. I'm on flex. Oh, see, flex. So I already can tell just based on this that this is using flex box or it's display flex. And so what I can do is watch as I then change that. Okay. And then I would say, oh, you know what? I'm not on the right item to actually see it jump and change in that case. So it might actually be on the container that, oh, yeah, I would actually also have to have my CSS. That's why. Okay. But what will happen here, and these are media containers that say at a certain is a minimum width of 750, then it changes things, right? So it's not as important that you necessarily, and by the way, I could just see it jump there as something changed, right? Because I went over that media query. So what I want you to do is play around with changing a site of your choice. Okay, so that's the idea, is choose a site of your choice and do some of the stuff that I was just doing, where you're changing the browser or you're going, and or I would say both, going into dev tools, right? So find a header, right? Look at the top navigation, right? Find a feature box where you have text and images that are in columns. That's a fairly typical thing. Like, oh, did I close Ruby? Let's go back to Ruby real quick. I had the same problem when I was actually in, uh, oh, there it is. When I was doing project recording. So sorry. Okay. So in this case, what I might do is go into one of the workouts, right? And then maybe go into this one and look at it. It's like, okay, here's a workout. All right. Strava, pricing, how to get started. Okay. So now I could go and look. Oh, yeah. See, I can already see. See what happened there? Is you see a change in the page to where how things are stacked. Not only so Flexbox generally is up at the top and then grid is inside, but it's not to say it's always that way. Okay. So I'm just telling you, right? So find a feature section, look for text and images and columns. Does the layout snap to a vertical stack when you shrink the browser, right? And this is the power of grid and media queries. And these are topics you're going to learn this week: how to use Flexbox, how to use CSS Grid and media queries to make your page respond, and that's what responsive design is, to the size of the viewport, what the user is looking through, because everybody's browser resolution is most likely, unless they're using the exact same monitor or the exact same phone, even on a phone or on a monitor, right? I could have my text very high, and that could impact. Remember the idea of rims, right? And how they work. So we want pages, and this is what Kevin emphasizes heavily in this course, which is why I like this course, that he and like using his content. And by the way, if you don't know, this is the first time I've used this. I've actually rewritten this course completely around using his, because I had used somebody else's in the past and I didn't like it as much. I really like Kevin's content. He's teaching you good beginner techniques. Okay. Okay. So what do? In your reply, right? Give us a site link, right? So I would post Ruby into my. Identify one area where the elements are horizontally aligned horizontally, maybe a menu, maybe a footer, right? Grid check, right? Identify an area that uses multiple columns and it goes from maybe 3 to 1 or 2 to 1 or more. Could be more. Okay. So that's worth 80 points, is doing that. And then also tell us a little more. Don't just make this, a quick. Actually think about this, because while you're thinking about this, you're pre-learning about the things you're about to be exposed to. Okay, and then after you reply, review at least one other student's audit and see how different sites handled their layout engines, right? So look at their posts and maybe go look at their site, add any additional things that you see, because trust me, if you could look at any site, like if I looked at news.google.com, right, I could also see the same thing where I would see it start to change as I shrink my browser down. Oh yeah, does it change as well? I can see the menu. So the menu is changing up here. Google News, nothing's changing there. Okay. But notice how this actually will change to not show, oh yeah, Okay, so I can already see how once I get down to more of a mobile design, okay, and now this is where, oh yeah, they actually are not using necessarily grid, but there are other things I'm sure I could see. Oh, actually, they are. Yeah, look at that. They are. Look at that. Okay, so they've moved from 3, okay, to 2. So every site, almost every site you can find of meaning, like that's why I said a professional website, once that is very well known, not obscure, because the more well known it is, the more they conform to these. So you're learning really important concepts, and I want you to have a preview of those and a way to at least look at them, because this is stuff that in your browsing of the web happens, but you don't think about most likely. So now you actually get a moment to think about that. All right, let me leave you with the importance of adding this in, because without this, and by the way, when you're coding along with Kevin, you really should be looking at the output to make sure it's doing what Kevin's is doing, because that's really how you connect the dots between a code along and understanding that if you've done that code along correctly. Matter of fact, this week I'm going to actually be looking, because I've been looking at commits more. I'm actually going to be looking at your page to make sure it outputs as Kevin's does. Okay. So just to give you that preview, I actually talked about this in attendance as well for the code along, right? So you're end up going to have a menu. So this is using Flexbox. You're going to have columns here. And Kevin's approach is really good and not that complicated to understand. And also how he used a wrapper class in order to implement. Notice how this page is acting. And we're going to use, and we have done a hero image. Kevin didn't do a hero image. We did. And we also did and using cover. Remember, we did that last week as well. Okay, that's your week 8 attendance. Have a great one. Reach out for help if you need.